dust of the courtyard is powdered gold in the late afternoon sun of 50 AD. You stand in the colonnaded shade of a Roman villa, watching a scene that rearranges the very atoms of history. A landowner, his tunic bordered with the faint purple of equestrian class, runs a practiced hand over the jawline of a 14-year-old slave girl. He checks her teeth, not for a smile, but for wear, for age, for health. His palms cup the span of her hips, measuring not her form, but her future. He turns, nods to a scribe. A leather ledger is opened. A figure is inscribed, 12,000 sestertii, not her price, her value. The calculated profit she will generate over 20 years if she produces 8 healthy children. This is not a livestock auction. This is human breeding, and the Romans didn't just practice it. They turned it into a science. What I'm about to show you will shatter the marble facade of Roman civilization. Because while they gave us law and literature and roads, they also perfected the most systematic, documented, and mathematically precise human breeding program in ancient history. And they wrote it all down. Marcus Crassus didn't become the richest man in Rome through military conquest alone. His true fortune was grown in the wombs of enslaved women. In 1987, archaeologists digging in the shadow of the Alban Hills found a fire-hardened leather chest in the sub-basement of a ruined villa. Inside were his ledgers. They read like agricultural manuals, because that's what they were. The columns didn't list wheat or olives. They listed women, girls, their ages, their purchase prices, and their projected reproductive yield. A healthy 16-year-old cost 2,000 sestertii, but Crassus's scribes calculated she could produce 8 to 10 children, each worth 1,500 on the market at age 5. A profit of 12,000 to 15,000, pure mathematical husbandry. The pages track menstrual cycles with hash marks. Pregnancy outcomes are logged as fruitful or barren. Child mortality rates are noted with the cold efficiency of a butcher's tally. One entry details the purchase of a Greek woman specifically because her previous owner vouched for her exceptional fertility and the quality of her offspring. She was a proven dam. The horror deepens in the pairing logs. Like a dog breeder selecting for traits, Crassus's overseers matched couples. A tall, muscular Thracian man, valued for his strength, was paired with a slender Cappadocian woman known for delicate hands suited to weaving. The goal: strong children with an aptitude for skilled craft. A beautiful Nubian woman was paired with a sharp-eyed Syrian man noted for his quick understanding, an attempt to breed attractive, intelligent house servants. This was eugenics, 2 millennia before the term was coined. The villa's architecture betrayed its purpose. Ground-penetrating radar revealed not just slave quarters, but a specialized wing. Larger chambers for pregnant women, not for comfort, but to cluster them for efficient monitoring and feeding. Separate nurseries, their floors sloped for drainage, designed to manage dozens of infants at once, a factory creche. This layout wasn't about humanity. It was about minimizing risk to valuable breeding stock. Modern forensics on skeletons from nearby burial pits confirm it. The bones of young women, some as young as 13, show pelvic deformations from repeated, closely spaced childbirths, stress fractures, evidence of rickets, then sudden periods of better nutrition, dietary manipulation timed to pregnancies. They weren't fed to be healthy. They were fed to be productive. But Crassus was just a practitioner. The true architects were the agricultural writers, the philosophers of the farm. Marcus Terentius Varro, in his definitive work Res Rusticae from 37 BC, dedicates entire sections to the management of familia, the slave family. His prose is calm, methodical, and utterly chilling. He recommends purchasing female slaves between 12 and 16 for optimal reproductive potential. He notes that younger girls require more initial investment before reaching productive capacity. The ideal age for first pregnancy: 15. This maximized reproductive years while minimizing the loss of investment through maternal death. His dietary advice is not for health, but for yield. Pregnant women get extra grain and occasional meat not out of compassion, but because malnourished mothers produce weaker, less valuable offspring. He advises segregating the strongest, healthiest male slaves, called fructuarii, the fruitful ones, for breeding purposes. Reward them with better rations, house them apart. Prevent uncontrolled mating that might dilute valuable traits. And the culling, Varro, is clear. A woman who fails to conceive after 2 years is a maintenance loss. Sell her. A man whose children are consistently sickly, remove him from the program. Reassign him to the mines or the mill, where his death is an economic write-off. This system required more than forced cohabitation. It demanded the systematic breaking of the human spirit. They called it the domesticatio period, the tamming. A new arrival, terrified, alone, was isolated. She saw no one but an older female slave, a trainer who was herself a product of the system. Food was weaponized. A bare subsistence diet for months, creating a physical weakness that crushed resistance. Then a piece of cheese, a sip of wine, granted only for compliance. The lesson was biological. Obedience equals survival. Cultural identity was deliberately erased. Native names were forbidden. Languages were banned. A Gallic girl became Marcella. A Thracian boy became Lucrio. Family bonds, the greatest threat to total control, were severed with surgical precision. A woman arriving with a child would have it ripped from her arms within hours, sold to a different estate, or consigned to the nursery to be raised as a nameless verna, a home-born slave. This served 3 purposes. It freed the mother for immediate breeding, it inflicted traumatic shock to break her will, and it gave the master permanent leverage. Be compliant, or you will never see your child again. The ultimate goal was the Verni system. Slaves born in the villa, who knew no other life, no song of freedom, no memory of a mother's embrace. These were the masterpiece of Roman breeding. They were considered superior to all others, more docile, more integrated, more naturally servile. Varro recommended that a well-run estate should aim for 80% of its slaves to be Verni. The system began with the breeding schedule itself. Pregnancies were timed for spring births, so weaning would coincide with the autumn harvest, when the mother's milk was less economically critical. Newborns were evaluated like lambs, healthy, branded with a villa mark, a defect. The historical record is silent on their fate, but the infant bones found in drainage ditches and shallow pits near villas tell their own story. Childhood for the Verni was a curriculum in compliance. Separated from birth mothers after weaning, raised in communal pens by aged nurse slaves, they never formed the bonds that foster independent will. Their education was strictly utilitarian. A child showing dexterity was pushed toward weaving, a strong boy toward the fields. The most insidious training was reserved for those chosen as future breeding stock. From puberty, they were instructed in sexual techniques designed for maximum fertility and minimal emotional attachment. Their purpose was explained as natural, ordained. They were the living, breathing machinery of the estate's prosperity. The public face of this private horror was the slave market. Auctions were theaters of dehumanization. Breeding stock was presented separately. Young women were made to walk, turn, and open their mouths for tooth inspection. Auctioneers' cries mingled with those of livestock sellers. Look at this one. Proven fertility. Bore twins 2 years ago, both healthy. Buyers, often fellow landowners, would perform invasive examinations right on the platform, checking for scars, assessing muscle tone, verifying virginity with a brutal public intimacy. Men were paraded for their physique, their seed vouched for by the seller's records. Sometimes, to demonstrate quality, a seller would present a slave's existing children at the same auction, living proof of genetic potential, sold separately to maximize profit and salt the wound. Roman medicine lent its authority to this atrocity. The physician Soranus of Ephesus wrote chapters on the gynecology of slaves. His texts describe fertility tests, prenatal care, and birthing procedures. The focus was never on the mother's health, but on the product. He details diets for pregnant slaves to produce sturdier infants. He describes maneuvers for difficult births where the priority is to extract the living child, even if it requires dismembering it in the womb. The most chilling evidence is the cesarean section. While rarely attempted on free Roman women, it was documented as a procedure for slaves, not to save the mother, to salvage the living child from a dying woman, a final extraction of value. But the system had a flaw: the human heart, the spark of resistance that no breeding program could eradicate. It exploded in 73 BC with Spartacus. His rebellion was more than a gladiator's fight for freedom. It was a targeted war on the economic engine of Rome. When his forces overran a villa, they didn't just loot it. They systematically destroyed its breeding infrastructure. The nursery walls were torn down. The breeding ledgers were burned in bonfires that lit the Campanian night. The specialized quarters for pregnant women were razed. Spartacus understood: liberate the people, but destroy the system that produces them. The Roman response proves how central this system was. Marcus Crassus, the same man of the ledgers, was given command. His tactics were ruthless, but his strategy was telling. He prioritized recapturing key breeding villas over pursuing the rebel army itself. The reproductive stock was a state asset. After the rebellion's bloody end, the crucifixions that lined the Appian Way from Rome to Capua were a specific warning. Among the thousands were a disproportionate number of women, those who had dared to dismantle the breeding apparatus. The archaeological record is a silent scream confirming the texts. At villas from Britain to North Africa, we find the same grim footprints. The specialized buildings, the odd ratios of infant to adult remains in burial sites, the artifacts, tiny lead tags with inventory numbers, medical instruments for gynecology found in estate houses, not cities. At the villa of Quintus Hortensius, they found a complex with a gynaeceum, a women's quarter, featuring a series of identical small rooms, each with a drain in the floor and a stone pallet. Next to it, a larger hall with rows of sunken basins, perfect for bathing infants. This was not a home, it was a facility. The legacy of Rome's breeding program is a poison that seeped through centuries. When European colonists established plantations in the Americas, they reached back for a model. They found it in Varro and Cato. The idea of a self-reproducing labor force, the economic calculations of raising stock, the systematic breaking of families, the breeding of favorable traits, these were not new inventions. They were Roman blueprints, adapted for sugar and cotton fields. The psychological techniques of isolation, dependency, and identity destruction used by modern human traffickers are direct descendants of the Roman domesticatio. The spreadsheets of a trafficker today, calculating the earning potential of a young woman, are the digital descendants of Crassus's fire-hardened ledger. This is the uncomfortable truth behind the glory that was Rome. Their genius was not just for engineering aqueducts, but for engineering human lives. Their law codified property rights, and they applied it with absolute logic to human flesh and future human potential. Their literature sang of heroism and destiny, while their agricultural manuals quietly detailed the most profound betrayal of humanity imaginable. It forces a terrible question. How much of civilization is just a beautiful veneer over a calculated horror? The Roman breeding program stands as a permanent warning. It shows how easily logic can be divorced from ethics, how science can be enlisted in service of monstrosity, and how the greatest atrocities are often not committed in fits of rage, but in the cool, quiet pursuit of profit. The bones in the ditch, the notches in the wax tablet, the silent, specialized rooms in the villa, they all tell the same story. That progress is a myth if it is built on the reduction of human beings to numbers in a ledger. The voices from that darkness have been buried for 2,000 years, but they are speaking now. And if you listen closely, in the rustle of papyrus and the sigh of bones, you can hear them asking us the most important question of all. What systems are we building today? What calculations are we making that future generations will uncover and judge with the same horrified awe?